Fabiola, you're going to, is it Emerson?
Yeah, Emerson.
Yeah, so is it like an MA program or is it like,
Yeah, it's an MFA, I think.
Dope. So do you teach for that at all or like?
I'm trying to get a TA position because the other day they like sent out this form to fill out if you want to do that, and I still haven't gotten anything back.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you know what like this is for both of you, do you know like what kind of like classes you're taking? Like what do you know what your schedule looks like?
Oh, yeah, and it's fucking stacked, at least for me. Oh, I should ask, am I allowed to swear or do you
Yes,
want me to not
yeah,
do that?
absolutely.
Cool, awesome. I registered for classes in June and I actually registered for them. I went to Europe for the month of June and then I had to register for classes like in Barcelona at like 8 a.m. But I'm taking seminars, I'm taking like a class on like broadcasting, I'm taking a class on communication science theories. And then I have my TA class, which I have to do 2 labs for, and I have to go to the lectures. So like my schedule is way busier than it was at Smith, especially senior year when I literally took like 2 real classes.
Yeah.
And like one of my classes was like a thesis meeting with Jen like every other week. So I don't know. What about you, Fabiola?
Yeah, I'm taking only 3 classes, and they're like the basics for film that they recommend every first year graduate student to take. But they're slightly longer than Smith classes, so
Gotcha.
I'd say it's on par with my Smith schedules.
Yeah. Word.
Well, do you want to talk about Riverdale?
I am always willing to talk about Riverdale, obviously.
Hello and welcome to It's Giving Camp. I am Saffron.
And I'm Fabiola.
And we have our guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Claire. Well, I'm going to be a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in communication arts, and specifically media and cultural studies. And I also did undergrad at Smith with Fabiola and Saffron, and we all majored in film and media studies together. And I feel like at this, I've been hesitant and I felt weird about this, but like I think at this point I can like legally call myself like a scholar of Riverdale.
Yep. Yeah, I think you
I'm
can.
qualified to do that as someone who's written maybe like 50-ish plus like academic pages of research about this show and has hyperfixated on the show for like 3 years. So I guess I am a Riverdale scholar among other media things, but that is what I am here to talk about today. So yeah. So I wrote a paper. The first paper I wrote about Riverdale was about its relationship to sort of the quality television discourses and sort of how it exists in that cultural context. So the way in which I sort of argue that as a show, it understands that it's not quote unquote quality or prestige TV, but it sort of draws from those traditions and sort of flips them and turns them into something that is much more soapy and sort of melodramatic, but with a knowing eye towards the sort of prestige genre, if we can call it a genre. And then the second article that I did was much more about Riverdale's cultural context. So I studied its the prevalence of Riverdale like cringe compilations on YouTube, which was a trend maybe in like sort of 2018, 2019 of like cringe compilations of like cringy lines from the show, cringy dialogue, whatever.
The writing on Riverdale is so bad.
Yeah, like Riverdale having bad writing for 2 minutes straight, and studied those videos in relation to the concept of crack videos, which are sort of a similar thing to sort of fan editing, fan remix, sort of appropriative fan video editing work, and looked at how those sort of videos, which we would think of as text considered sort of anti-fanish, sort of like degrading a television show, actually have a lot in common with a fanish sort of a devotional texts that are really like they praise a show and they sort of uplift it. These shows or these examples of sort of like Riverdale having bad writing require the same amount of effort and editing and intense research, but are taken from a totally different standpoint. So I look at those and the way that they have a conversation with the show. Yeah, those are the sort of main things that I've done about it.
Very cool. I loved both of those presentations. I was in both of those classes. I had seen the Riverdale pilot, I think, on like 3 different occasions. It kept being something that my friends would be like, let's watch Riverdale. We would watch the pilot and then not watch anything else.
Yeah.
So, but of course I know it because it's a show that is infamous at this point.
I would say infamous, absolutely infamous.
And yeah, you're the little like list that you sent. I was like, oh, this feels very Claire. This feels very like well thought out. Like, here's some details. Here's some links.
Yeah, well, you guys said like send like less than like 5 episodes, and I was like, oh god. First of all, how do I even send only 5? Because if I really wanted, I would just assign all of like season 6. Because this is actually perfect timing. Because as we're recording this on Sunday, the finale of season 6 came out, and it was like one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life, and it was awesome.
I've seen some clips.
Oh yeah. That was the season 6 episode where they bring back like Kiernan Shipka as Sabrina Spellman. That was the episode that I sent to you guys. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely something for sure. God.
Yes. So I remember watching the first season as it aired.
Oh, you watched the whole thing?
Yeah, wow. I watched the first season. I thought it was fun, but it's also, compared to the rest of the show, a normal show.
Oh yeah,
because when season 2 starts, it gets crazy.
That's what I always tell people is I have so far, I think, convinced maybe like 3 people to like watch this show in earnest, like all the way through, and they've all become like deeply obsessed with it in the same way that I am. But I always say that like you kind of have to push through seasons 1 and 2 because they're the seasons that are still like quote unquote normal television. Like they're still, because I remember when like all the sort of discourse around Riverdale now is like the first 2 seasons were good and then they totally went off the rails. And I'm like, first of all, the first 2 seasons were boring and now it's great, because it was like, I don't know, my sort of feelings about it are that the show kind of needed to like be quote unquote normal cringe before it could sort of like evolve into what it is, which is now a show where all of the main characters have superpowers and like random shit happens every single episode and it's like balls to the wall, like no stops. This is a show that commits to the bit hard, and it needed
also,
to sort of
isn't
like,
the next season gonna be set in 1955 and they're in high school again?
yeah I feel like I can spoil this because like who really cares, but like the end of the season, which involved Cheryl getting all of the powers, so everyone in all of the main cast has superpowers now. And Cheryl has like pyrokinetic / phoenix powers that allow her to resurrect people. And so she received the powers from all the other characters via getting kissed by Veronica. And she like uses it to stop Bailey's comet, which is hurtling towards Riverdale for some reason. And then as a result of that, all of the characters are transported back to like the 1950s version of like the original comic books, and they're all in high school again, and like Jughead remembers things but like no one else does, and like that's where they leave us. And I think the showrunner has been pretty explicit about the fact that like that's where it's just going to be for the last season. Like it's just going to be in the 50s now.
And it's the last season, right? They only have one more.
Yeah, they're only going to season 7, and like there was a whole thing about the CW was canceling a bunch of shows, but Riverdale was one that wasn't getting canceled because like they had already planned, or like always planned on there being like 7 seasons. Not that they necessarily knew where they were going with that.
I was like 7 was seasons, this their plan?
Oh, fuck no. Absolutely the fuck not. There was no plan. I do think that like there is a degree to which this sort of ridiculousness is always where the show was going. Like I think there is some sort of planning in place in which like the show knew that it was going to go off the rails, because the comic books had been going off the rails long before the show had even started. like the comics have like fucking zombies in them now and random shit, all because of the showrunner Roberto, I forget the rest of his name. But yeah, so I think that much was sort of like planned out, that they knew that like the show was going to result in some crazy shit, but they needed to like get through the normal shit first. Normal fucking like normal like murder. Like
well, I think it's so interesting, like I was never a big like Archie comics fan, but my best friend Willa was loves Betty and Veronica, and was really like kind of frustrated when the Riverdale trailer first dropped, because it was like, why are we like grim darking this like fun nostalgic comic series? And I think Riverdale was really kind of the first of this kind of like trend in like rebooting classic media that wasn't like already like superhero stuff into quote unquote realistic, which is just, I mean, it's just a teen soap, and teen soaps have murders and lots of sex, and I don't know, I think it's very interesting that like the original premise of maybe this is not a totally fair assessment. One of the ways I see the arc of Riverdale is that the first season where it's like, let's take this fun piece of media that's like just
also like specifically low stakes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so low stakes.
Let's take that,
like episodic as fuck.
Make that serious, make that, you know, there's a mystery and it's serial, and then over the course of the show they just they go back to kind of the premise that like the comics have of like, oh, it's just wacky and fun, and there are high stakes, but also the stakes don't really have any meaning to them because people can die and be brought back over and over again.
Oh, literally, like it's back to what it was as a comic book in a lot of ways. Like I remember there was an article I was reading about the show that was about sort of the production around it, and as they were trying to pitch it, there was an exec or something that said like, you need a dead body, like you need to like bring in a dead body in the first season in order for there to be some drama, because like in a lot of ways Riverdale was taking after like Pretty Little Liars and like kind of even like the Vampire Diaries in terms of like a soap that was based on some kind of teenage property. Those ones were books. This was a comic book series, and sort of taking it and then like twisting it and making it like sexy and dark for teenagers basically. But Riverdale like had to follow in that until it eventually kind of went, in a way it feels like it fell off the rails culturally because that's how it was described in the media, but realistically it returned to what it was, which was a comic book with absolutely zero real stakes, where like batshit stuff happens and that's fine. And like there are no rules, which is sort of what I like love so much about it now as a show, is that it truly pulls out, like it pulls every single punch and does not give a single fuck. And like it's like no show would like dare to like bring back a random character from another show for no fucking reason and like have them go to the dead and like like it's just so, and like have her bring back like Jughead, but like her boyfriend in Jughead's body, just so they can like have pasta together and like presumably fuck, and then like that's it. And like I don't know, it's just like so. And I think too that like it started as a show, so I gave in addition to the episodes, I gave a comparison clip between like, everyone knows like the weirdo speech that Jughead gives in like season 1.
It's so iconic.
Oh, it's so iconic. And then to a lesser extent, most people know the like, I dropped out of school in the 4th grade to run drugs to support my nana, blah blah blah, triumphs and defeats of high school football.
Yeah.
But like very few people know about the season 4, like my fucking favorite line ever by Betty, which is where she like threatens Donna, is like, I'm the ultimate wild card, like I'm the daughter of the Black Hood. And to me, when I watch a performance like that, I'm like, this is deliberate. Like what is happening here is like, even the way that they literally like add the dramatic music and they do I forget the technique where like
they're doing dolly zooms.
They're doing dolly zooms, like it's just for like shits and giggles. Like
and I watched those clips immediately after watching the pilot, and I was like, oh God, what's the actress who plays Betty?
Lily Reinhardt.
Yeah.
One of the best performers in the show.
Her line readings are completely different in this season 4 Donna clip, where it's so it has this like intensity to it that is like just the way she's stressing her words. It's like hyper realistic. It's so much more like, I don't know. I can't. I feel like I'm not very good at,
it's so much more than it calls for, and like the original Betty, as we see her in the pilot, is so much more fun, like so much more toned down. And she's like
completely the girl next door trope, in all this earnestness and sweetness that feels like self-aware to an extent, but it's not like it doesn't need to be big because you understand who that character is and who that trope is.
One of my favorite things about Betty is how they just keep giving her all this like darkness. Because first it was Dark Betty, and then it was the serial killer Jean, and now she's the harlot of Babylon and
she
is not allowed to go into heaven.
Well, and that's the thing, is that I don't know if this is something that only I notice as someone who's watched the show multiple times, but like Lily Reinhardt is visually, to me, the actor on the show who is like, number one, probably the best actor on the show, or one of the best, and number two, the actor who is most done with the show. Because if you look at her performance in the episode that I sent for season 6, like her line deliveries are just like, she's giving nothing, and it's amazing how she is like, and just like, oh shit, well I guess I'm the harlot of Babylon, okay. Like there's a certain way that all of the characters carry themselves in that season 6 episode where they're all just like, fuck, I guess this is our life now, like whatever. Like there is a certain sort of blasé, like this is what our life is like, and that's fucking fine. And like her facial expressions and facial comedy in that episode as she watches like, what is like the Greek mythology, like
she gives a face.
Chiron, and she's like, what's going on? Like it's like it's
it's a weird like juxtaposition between the fact that the plot of the episode is so, you know, balls off the wall insane, it's so fun. Meanwhile, it does not seem like the actors are having fun.
Literally at all. Like, I think Madeline Pesh is having a good time because she, like, I think like Cheryl Blossom as a character has always been this sort of like deliberate camp, like center of the show. Even at the beginning of the show, it was always deliberately, she was supposed to be sort of like a weird off the wall sort of character. But like the rest of them are like,
whatever. She's one of the pilot episode standouts. Cheryl.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I love a mean girl, and I have a mean girl character for I think I can say this by the time this podcast episode will come out. I play a mean girl in an upcoming fiction podcast that I'm a part of, and I mentioned that I to my partner who's involved with, was the GM of the store where I play a mean girl, and I was like, I feel like my character Stephanie is like more insane than Cheryl, and they were like, Saffron, like I love you, you can't, like no one compares to Cheryl. No.
Like you can't say that. Like I mean, just to give you an idea, in this most recent season, like finale episode, so she gains everybody's powers. She dresses up like Scarlet Witch for no reason.
Wait,
she
actually?
flies into.
Yeah, that's one of the clips that I've seen around on Twitter. She's wearing the Scarlet Witch like jacket.
Oh yeah, like it's crazy.
I do. Oh, at some point we need to talk about the kinds of pop culture references this like.
Oh my god, all of the references to brands, like, oh my god.
Also, I was like fascinated by the Midnight Club episode because it's it's a parody of a parody at this point. It's like nostalgia, it's like 80s nostalgia, but it's not for actual 80s, it's for like the fictionalized version of the 80s from current, you know, like remakes like It and Stranger Things, and then also like actual 80s films. It feels so like multiple steps away from reality when they cut to the flashback of these costumes with the music. I was like, oh my god, this is not real. Nothing looked like this. Nothing.
It's like, this is not a real, like, it's
it was very much the 80s by way of pop culture inspired by the 80s, like how Jughead's dad has the same cast from the first It
right?
movie.
That's what I was gonna say, with like
they have
literally
and they have Anthony
culture.
Michael Hall playing the principal.
Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that. And it's like, oh, she plays her game lad instead of like a Game Boy. It's like, so like, it is sort of just like they put a bunch of things into a microwave and we're like, they didn't even really care, like, but at the same time, like, there is such a deliberateness that is so like, it's very deliberate, but it doesn't make any sense at all.
It was just supposed to be one Saturday. 8 hours, 6 people with seemingly nothing in common. The bad girl.
Alice Smith.
The rebelling Catholic.
Hermione Gomez.
The teacher's pet.
Penelope Blossom.
The artist, athlete.
Fred Andrews.
The political animal.
Sierra Samuels.
And the ladies' man.
Forsyth Pendleton Jones Jr.
Forsyth Pendleton Jones Jr. He was the BMOC, an all-American athlete, a stud muffin, as we used to say.
This does bring me to a question that I want to ask, which is, like, there are these episodes like the Midnight Club that their visuals and the costume and the lighting and like the camera choices feels like very we talk about, like, we've talked a lot about how like camp is in the visuals, and I like see like the layers there and things not being what they are in episodes like the Midnight Club. But then also when I'm watching like the most recent episode that you showed us, the Witches of Riverdale, I'm like, is this camp? Is this just like melodramatic bad television? And I
oh, literally,
at some point I'm kind of like, is Riverdale the entire show camp, or is it just like certain episodes? Or I don't know. This is mostly I'm posing to Fabiola because I feel like you're the person I turn to as an expert on camp. But
I feel like the first season is naive camp in the sense of Jughead's speech and how a lot of the dialogue is really toned down compared to later seasons, and the colors are way more muted. Like, it's basically a standard teen murder mystery with some 1950s stuff peppered in, and
1950s but also not, because they're reference modern cultural
Cheryl
references.
Drops her Twitter handle like in the pilot episode like for no reason.
Basically how the camp in the first season is mostly due to the fact that the Archie comics characters are going through a murder mystery plot, which classically they wouldn't have. Like in the classic comics, the most stakes are, will Archie pick Betty or Veronica? Like, that's how big of a stakes it usually got to.
It kind of has Scooby Natural vibes now that I think about it, from Supernatural, the Supernatural episode where they meet Scooby-Doo.
And so basically in the later seasons, the whole point is just to throw every single kind of stake at the Archie comics characters. And I do think it's so interesting how people are like, the first season was good because it had logic, but now I think the internal logic of the show is that there is no logic, and the whole point is to just have things happen to these characters, have every kind of plot imaginable happen to these characters.
Have they introduced aliens in Riverdale yet?
I'm
Yes.
pretty sure they have.
They did in season 5, although they ended up being like fake aliens. They were like not aliens, but they introduced the plot line anyway. Season 5 is a weird season because it was like the COVID season, and it was the season after the 5-year time jump. So it's sort of like a weird wash kind of season, but they bring in the aliens. Jughead also gets captured and meets the Rat King in New York. So
Wow. Okay.
it's definitely, yeah. It's definitely a throw everything that you can at the sort of characters just to sort of see what sticks. And then there is just like such a like, I mean, it's so much more to me. I also think it's interesting because as a show visually, like it doesn't not have a budget. Like it visually, it still looks pretty good, which is sort of shocking. But there's also a degree to which they're just like throwing everything away for the benefit of style. Like I think about Veronica's outfits in like the season 6 episode. She's wearing like a bright pink like pantsuit, Hillary Clinton style. And then in Cheryl's house, which first of all, like the use of candles in her house, I always love because it's like there's like fully only candles everywhere. It reminds me of like Spike's like crypt in Buffy a little bit. That it's like there's no reason for it to look like this, but it's fine. And then like when they're doing all this stuff with like the witches, someone, I guess in the prop department or something, just decided to like pump in fog. So like there is just fog all over the house.
Fog just magically appears.
Watching that episode is really interesting to me as someone who watched all of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So I was like, oh, suddenly Riverdale looks like this other show.
No, absolutely.
Just to clarify, as someone who didn't watch Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, that show ended with Sabrina dying, right?
Yes. So she was like very dead.
The
100% dead.
The whole explanation of, oh, my boyfriend, he then later learned to be a necromancer and sacrificed himself to bring me back. They just totally come up with that so to give her a reason to be in Riverdale.
Yes, because I'm pretty sure Nick dies and then they're like in the afterlife together. Last time we heard of it in the show.
Yeah, the Sabrina finale ends with her and Nick in heaven, and that's it.
Yeah, so they were just like, fuck it, like let's bring Kiernan Shipka back. And I will say Kiernan Shipka really seems like she knows what show she's on, because she's giving one-liners like nobody else.
She's a
like
star.
She's like, great name, by the way, Jughead. Like, oh, these boys are so cute.
Yeah.
And she's like doing the most, because I think she's coming from the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which in my mind was always a little bit more forthcoming about its sort of other campy aspects, or just like being more extravagant, because compared to Riverdale, it was on Netflix. It was allowed to be a little bit more, like a little bit darker, quote unquote. It was allowed to have some more edgy things going on. It was always sort of explicitly a little bit campier from the start because like witches are involved. And so like
from the very beginning, it's weird.
I loved all of the costume designs from the clips I saw from Sabrina. I think the visuals that I like the most in the episodes we watch is I love all of the weird heaven / alternate dimension where it's all like it looks like the old comics.
Yeah, and well, like even that is still so weird. Like Archie's version of heaven is him with Betty, and they have 2 kids, and their names are, I don't know if you caught this, Little Polly and Little Fred. Like that's their names.
Including
like Betty is not just little, they're Lil, like Lil Fred and Lil Polly. And they're played by, those actors are the ones who usually play the young Archie and young Betty whenever they do flashback sequences. So they just like put them in and we're like, fuck it, whatever.
That's resourceful.
Also,
not need to cast again.
I love how Jason keeps getting brought up
I
years and
know.
years after the first season.
Like, this actor, there's no way he thought he was gonna have like a bigger role than like just sort of being in the episodes for a little bit and flashbacks, because he keeps coming back. I mean, he was a whole ass corpse for like 2 seasons, just sort of hanging out. I don't think that was him, but like, yeah, I don't know.
I feel like for more than 2 seasons, because I've heard that also Cheryl just kind of props him up occasionally, like as the seasons go by. Like the body's just in her house.
She, I think, has him like, they never explain exactly why his body is still preserved and not like completely destroyed, but they do give him a Viking funeral, I think at the end of around like season 4 or season 3 or something, like an actual Viking funeral. They like send him off in a boat that's on fire on Sweetwater River. And then when they bring him back from the dead in season 6, because she just decides to do that, he ends up being like weird and sort of evil. So she lights him on fire again with her pyrokinetic powers and kills him again with like 2 episodes later. I think the episode before the one I showed you guys, or like maybe the episode after that. Yeah.
Damn. This Riverdale is a show that you really have to like, there's so much context that you miss without watching it. And even like, how do you keep track of all of the different storylines having watched it so
my
much?
brain is destroyed. My brain is broken.
Yesterday I watched this video that was kind of explaining the whole trajectory of the show, and one of the most popular comments was how someone said that watching an episode of Riverdale feels like you missed an episode of Riverdale.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's one of those where basically every scene of the show now that exists in some ways is a reference to something else in the show from the past, or like, but it's strange because it's not the same as if it was like serialized. Like serialized television like will build off from the next episode and like follow a general plot trajectory. And Riverdale seems like a show that's trying to do that. Like they'll constantly reference, I think in 3 of the episodes I sent you, Cheryl references like being an agent of chaos and like as like being a character trait that she has. But that's not like a serialized plot line. It has had any growth over the seasons. It's just like a callback. So it's a show that's more built on callbacks than it is an actual plot, because the plot is so convoluted, which is very similar to a comic book format. So again, it's just returning to the sort of like comic book as a television show.
There isn't like an internal like logic that motivates like character motivations for character plots that have like themes that emerge. Like, I don't know, it does kind of, but I mean, I was watching the show and I was like, this is a show about nothing. Like, obviously
it's about nothing, and it's about every single thing you can imagine.
Oh yeah, it is fully a vibes-based television show.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in. Have you ever seen me without this stupid hat on? That's weird.
Why are you getting so upset?
I mean, obviously you can, any piece of media you can watch and take away meaning from it and like have your own interpretations of it. But I was watching the show and I was like, this doesn't feel like a show that has a message at all. Like there's no meaning, and I don't even know if what the intention of like the writers and the showrunners are in terms of like what kind of story they want to be telling. Are like, I don't even know if they're trying to tell a story that's fun. I'm like, they're just telling a story.
Yeah, they're telling a story, and like, is it even really a story? Because the conflicts come and go with like absolutely no regard for anything at all. And it's a show that seems to just be interested in like putting its characters in situations that are like as absurd, but also as weird and funny as possible. Like maybe this is a good time to bring in the musical episode, because Riverdale has a musical episode every single season. And the one that I had you guys watch was the one from season 4, and I believe it was Hedwig, which,
yes.
well, that one I wanted to bring in too, because it's an example of like the sort of musical that they selected to do is a campy musical. Like it's sort of based in that tradition. And like, it's also a show that is like, I believe predominantly like voiced and sung, and like the main character is like a trans woman. And like they
or
have
genderqueer
like, Betty
in some way.
Or genderqueer or something, but they're having like straight up Betty sing this song about like dressing up in drag, and like they're putting Kevin at the center of the story because he's like the only gay character, but like it's not really, there is no logic or reason. They're just having him, they dress him up in like a wig and drag. They have all the characters dress up as Hedwig, like, and stand in the hall like as a way to sort of
it really is
Mr.
interesting
Honey.
to this episode that's all about like making a point about like respecting queer identities when you know, very first episode pilot has such a classic case of queer baiting with that Veronica and Betty kiss.
Yeah
I did really enjoy that episode. I didn't think that I would, but it's not as camp as Hedwig, the actual musical is. Of course it's not. But I did like the visuals and the choreography that they did end up doing for the dance number or the musical numbers.
Yeah, what was really interesting in regards to how they use the songs is how devoid of the original context they are.
Oh literally, yeah. Like they don't give a single shit.
Especially the song "Exquisite Corpse."
I
was laughing
favorite when they're yelling at each other. Like
yes, they turned a song about botched gender affirming surgery into couples fighting.
They like were just like, fuck it, we don't care, like whatever. Like there is such a like pulling out, and I think they do this with all of the pop culture references in the show. There's like a yanking from the cultural context and like placing it with, they're just sort of plopping it on the page and like saying like whatever, it's fine. Like they do that. I mean, it's even obvious in the pilot when they just bring up like Mad Men for no reason, and they talk about HBO, and it's just sort of like a name dropping of these cultural objects. And like it gets even better, I think, when you talk about the way that the show uses, well, one, uses product placement, but also doesn't use product placement. So like certain brands, I forget what the names of them usually, I mean, so the prison that like, and like I think Hiram creates in the show is called Shankshaw Prison instead of Shawshank Prison.
In the Hedwig episode, they mention Little Ciceros instead of Little Caesars. They say Little Ciceros.
So it's not the 4 seasons, it's the 5 seasons. Instead of Grinder, it's Grind'em. It's American Excess instead of American Express. Then there's Spiffanies and Glamourage eggs. There is Triple C instead of Triple A, the like car thing.
What does Triple C stand for? What does that mean?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Vanity Fair, The Bachelorette. And there's a ton of others. I just love it. It's like Barnaby's or something. Yeah, American Excess. The Baxter Brothers book instead of the Hardy Boys. Flinger, I think is what it is.
What?
Is that a Spiffany's bag I saw coming through the lobby earlier today?
When I joined 23 Hour Fitness at Troubadour in Seaside. I just got off the phone with the Bank of Riverdale.
Glamour's your egg?
Someone told him about the Midnight Club.
He's the new RROTC instructor.
Don't miss Whistler.
Now we're back to Fizzle Rocks.
I'm asking you to play Griffins and Gargoyles.
Is there poison in these fresh aids?
Yesterday, Mrs. Crabapple took my game lad and she locked it up in here. I'm going to TGI Thursdays.
At any rate, like there's a ton of like weird kind of specific references that are designed to like, they are supposed to remind you of a broader cultural context, but like they're not supposed to be. It's just so like blasé to me. Like they just don't give a fuck.
And it really does seem like in the pilot, and I guess in the later stuff too, but also later stuff, it gets so bonkers that they're not even really making pop culture references. But like the pop culture references that they're making, I'm like, how like how many kids, like sophomores in high school in like 2017, are going to be making Mad Men references as a way to insult someone? Like it seems so out of touch.
And Truman Capote references.
Yeah!
This place is strictly in cold blood. Like, no one fucking says that. And I think it's even evidenced by the fact that, so Riverdale as a show really has no idea what time it takes place in, because it was designed originally to sort of take place in like the sort of vague now, whatever. And then when they graduate from high school, I think they talk about being accepted into the class of 2024 for college. And then we have the 5-year time jump. So presumably it's what, like 2020 something, but no, Veronica has a scene where she's talking to her husband at the time, Chad, who she later murders. And she says like, it's 2020, Chad, like women really can have it all or something. And it's a show that also like wants cell phones to exist, but doesn't really want them to exist in a way that matters. And like Archie's like in season 5, Archie like goes to war, like quote unquote war, like there's a war going on, and all of his flashback scenes look like he's in the trenches of World War One. Like he's wearing the whole getup, but it's like, what year is it? Like like it doesn't matter.
It's because
it's a crucial thing.
They're yanking aesthetics without meaning, right? Isn't that it?
I love the tapes and the Hedwig episodes and the amount of old TVs. And I specifically love the last footage at the end with the people wearing the classic character masks, just one killing the other with a rock on this old analog tape.
It's that like, well, season 4 is the murder mystery season. It's also where Jughead gets mysteriously killed, but not killed. And it is also the weird, mysterious voyeur things where we have VHS tapes for like no apparent reason other than like they wanted to talk about VHS tapes in the show. And so there they are. Like, it is such a show that like, it really does not have any regard for time period, for meaning, for any kind of like it doesn't really, they don't really give a shit. And I think it's evidenced by the fact, so I mentioned in the season finale of season 6, Cheryl has to receive the powers from all the other characters. And Veronica, who is basically a human dialysis machine, like that's her powers, like I'll get all their powers and absorb them, and then I'll like give them to you via a kiss. And Cheryl says, A, that's queer baiting. Like she says that. And B, how do we know that'll work or something? But like she starts with A, that's queer baiting. And Veronica says, her response is, A, it's not queer baiting, it's saving the world. Which to me is such like Riverdale, we talk about like the Betty and Veronica kiss as such a queer bait, but like, and it's like one of those classic ones. It was 2017, like the era we knew, like it was so, but they're still doing that. Like right before the season finale, like the sort of like teaser for the finale episode had Veronica and Cheryl like fully making out, and they were like, oh, what's the reason for this? Like, and they just sort of like tease it for like no apparent reason other than they want to, or like, oh my god, the one that I sent you guys that was Veronica performing Ladies Who Lunch, which like she does that and does this performance that is like one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. It's very clearly not being received well by the audience. Every single character looks like they're staring off to space like they're in the office. And then that's where it's like, speak of
this
it.
feels like the real actor's response. Like this feels like
you look at like Tony's actress and she just like looks out to the side like, what the fuck? And like they never talk about it again. Like the next scene is her being like, yeah, I was in company when I went to Bar Nerd or something. And then like they never speak of this scene. It's like it disappeared, and like she's fucking like goes hard, like the visual and physical comedy that she's expressing.
She's basically having a tantrum.
Literally, she like
in front of
out the cherry.
The rest of the cast.
She throws the glass full of like a drink and just like, no, it's just so ridiculous to me. And like it just happens and it exists and then it's over. And like it doesn't, it's like it passes right through your brain. Like it just doesn't matter at all.
So this is what I find so interesting in the conversation about camp, where it's like, okay, if I think Fabiola, you said something along the lines of like camp is finding like the depth and superficiality. Riverdale, like this seems like such a superficial show. They're just throwing all these things.
Oh yeah.
Is there meaning there?
Fuck no. I don't think there is. I think to me as a show, it reads as a show that at least now as it exists, understands the way that it is received culturally, which is as like a degraded object that is bad, but like off the rails and insane. And I think it's a show that's trying to be deliberate camp. Like it's trying to sort of be like ridiculous and weird on purpose. Like it's sort of trying to do the Sharknado thing of like, we're so bad, we're good. But as a result, it's still failing to achieve any real meaning. So to me, it circles back around to being like, this is funny because you guys don't realize that like you're trying to do something funny and weird, and it's like it's failing, but it is so good. Like it is so great for what it is, you know? I don't know.
I think to me the meaning in this show is just how much of an anomaly it is in regards to like television in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like there really is nothing like this show, and because of that, it really is worth observing and paying attention to and studying. I remember people talking about how the first season was trying to be like Twin Peaks Lynchian, but now I feel like the show is fully Lynchian in the sense that it's doing things for the sake of doing them, and that's where the enjoyment comes from.
Yeah. I almost like, I do think that there is like, you are able to find meaning from this, but I feel like the meaning doesn't come from the show itself. It comes from like, Claire, you've done for one of like the pieces that you wrote at Smith on Riverdale was like looking at like the fan cringe compilations and fan edits, and like and I there's almost like, I feel like the academic comparison of like, okay, let's look at how it was like the season 6 on its own isn't camp, but when you put season 6 in context to how it evolved from season 1 and like the layers of dialogue there, that's where like there is meaning, like there's so much depth from that because it changed so much and also changed so little at the same time.
Well, it's also because it's been going on for so long. Like I mentioned this at the beginning, but Riverdale is one of the few shows that I feel like has a sort of massive, like relatively massive cultural sway that still like airs every fucking week and has 22 episodes per season and like fully goes for it. It's like a sort of old mainstay of like old television and like what old teen TV used to be in like the sort of early 2000s or whatever. And it's still sort of like, it sort of is what happens when that idea of television meets us where we are now in the sort of streaming era, which is so like, it's very much about like this tiny concept that we can squeeze 6 episodes out of and then forget about forever. Whereas Riverdale is a show that has been going for since 2017 for like 5 years plus, and like has never once like taken its foot off the gas at all, because it's just like it's a show that needs to fit a ton of shit. It needs to like fit enough stuff into 22 episodes, which like television doesn't really have to do anymore. And like it has to like be entertaining every single week, and it still manages to do that and like capture the attention of people despite that. I think part of the reason the show is so special to me as a person is because like I watch every single episode as it airs, like with one of my best friends. Like we watch them on Zoom together and just like sort of freak out about it because it's still sort of event television. It's one of the few sort of like weekly event televisions that like I personally still have in my life.
And I feel like even though a lot of people don't watch it, they still kind of want to know what's going on.
Oh, well, there's that guy on TikTok who like recaps every single episode, and like there's tons of people who do that. Yeah, totally.
Like every once in a while on Twitter, people are like, "Wait, this is what's happening in Riverdale now," and it has this car crash quality to it that has kept on for years and years. it's just compelling.
It's super compelling, and like it's one of those that feels very constant in a world where like we have to wait like years for a new season of a show. This is a show that still runs, like has the sort of typical like you clock in, you clock out, like you span out the episodes that you have, you sort of like crank out what you can of a plot, and then you're sort of over it. Like I think about what it is to be like a working actor, and like I look into the eyes of the actors on Riverdale, and I'm like, that is what it means to be a working actor, to be exhausted and like visibly like so over your show, but like you're still catching the paycheck. Like it's so like, and no, it's like I totally get what you mean when it comes to sort of like the checking in every once in a while, because it's never a show that's like lulled. Like you can check in and there's always new shit going on. Like there's a guy that does, I don't remember his name, but he's on TikTok and he like recaps every single episode of Riverdale, and like those videos like get like a ton of views on TikTok, but it's just people with like no context for like where things have gone. And it still has that sort of cultural cachet as like a weird and still like really degraded object, but it's because it's fucking funny and like so ridiculous. Yeah, it's so wild.
Another chance to disapprove, another brilliant singer, another reason not to move, another vodka stinger. I'll drink to that.
I was really entertained by this season 6 episode that you sent us, because it's just so incredibly wild, especially in comparison to the pilot episode.
Yeah.
Because everything is just supernatural, and there's like a rapture war going on.
Literally.
And a bunch of the main cast is dead, and they seek out the help of the protagonist of this other show to help them.
Yeah. And there's so many like random new characters that are like, they have the sort of main core cast of I think like 6-ish, maybe like 7 actors, but then they like circle in sort of new people. So like they're the new characters of like Tabitha, who's like Pop Tate's, I want to say like granddaughter. And she's the one who's like now dating Jughead. And then they have Percival Pickens, who is like the new big bad of the whole show.
That
because
man is
in a
so
previous
stereotypically
season,
British.
yeah, and he is giving. That actor knows what show he is on, and he is fucking slaying it up. Like that man, like he is an actor who understands the
his
assignment
magic
of
swords. His magic swords.
the daggers of Megiddo. Oh my god!
And also, I love this one scene where suddenly this Reggie doll is talking to Reggie.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I was gonna scream.
Like with no context at all. It's like, why is he talking to a fucking marionette doll?
It
like,
just starts to happen, and I'm just staring at it.
Yeah.
The thing that I was thinking while watching this season 6 episode was the fact that they look exactly the same as they did in the pilot, where they were supposed to be sophomores in high school, and now they're supposed to be, yeah, there's a 5-year time jump. It's supposed to be
like in their
20s. Yeah,
like
late
in their
20s.
mid-20s. Yeah,
That, I mean, maybe it's just because we like the most recent episode that I edited for release was the Valley of the Dolls episode, where we talked about like things not being what they are, and like actors who are supposed to be actors who are younger playing characters who are older. This feels like the casting of this show never aligns with like the reality that they're supposed to be depicting, and that's honestly the fact that that doesn't change, that even as the time moves on, they don't feel like they're supposed to fit into these, they don't look like they're supposed to fit into these characters, is so camp to me.
Yeah,
they consistently look the same age, they either look too old or too young, depending on the season.
Yeah, well, because they are too young. Like, I think Lily Reinhart is maybe 23, and she's supposed to be playing like a 27-year-old. And she doesn't look 27. Like, none of them look old enough to be playing the actors that they're like playing the characters that they're playing. And they're just sort of like wearing whatever the fuck they want to wear. Like, there is not really any care for like the context or situation. Like, everyone sort of has the costume. Like, in all of season 6, I think the only thing that Archie wears is like a flannel shirt because he like works in a construction thing and is invulnerable, and like that's the thing. And then like Betty wears a lot of like, she works for the CIA, so she wears like pants and a random shirt. And then Veronica I think has the weirdest style of anyone on the show, just because like she is the character who like looks, I think, the most ridiculous, at least this season. She has like fucking pastel pink stuff. But she also, for several episodes, dresses sort of like the corpse bride, because she is, well, her superpower is that she's basically like a poison woman. Like, she, I don't know how to explain this. She learns when she hooks up with a guy and accidentally kills him by kissing him, that she can expel poison at will and kill anybody she wants. She's also invulnerable to all poison. She makes absinthe now by filtering it through her body. Like, that's her business, is that she makes.
How? Wait, filtering in what direction?
I don't know. They never explain it at all. But like, she basically is a human dialysis machine. So I don't know if you guys remember, like, have any knowledge of this, but Betty's brother Charles there's a lot of confusion.
The fake brother,
but then she has the real brother come in, but the real brother is a serial killer. And he accidentally almost dies of like liver poisoning, but then Veronica saves him by like filtering his blood through her body. At any rate, for a couple of episodes, she dresses entirely in black and like wears dark lipstick and has like a veil over her because she's like poison to other people. And she bemoans this because she worries that she'll never be able to hook up with anyone again because she'll kill them accidentally. And then Archie, who's invulnerable, is like, well, you can kiss me, I won't die. And so they make out in front of Betty with Betty's consent.
I love the fact that in the first episode, Kevin's like, well, Betty and Archie are endgame. And then we get like, oh, they are in heaven together. They are endgame. Yeah. And then it's like, actually, they're not, because time travel, there's potential futures where
Tabitha's powers are like seeing the future.
I wish
right?
so badly that I could explain. So every single character has an episode that's like when they learn about their superpowers. And Tabitha's episode, I wish I could have showed it to you guys. I can't because it's no longer available on a CW website because it's not on Netflix yet. But it involves her going back in time to, I don't remember what the first thing is, but the second event that happens is the assassination of MLK. And like, she goes back in time. Here's the thing, is that Riverdale, in addition to being a sort of like weird, like, in addition to its ideas about like pulling things out of their cultural out of cultural context, had a really weird relationship with like the BLM protests of 2020, because they, like, as a result of the backlash with that, brought back Josie and the Pussycats, who were out of the show for a really long time, and then they brought in Tabitha, which was a new character. And her time travel episode, where she learns that she has time travel, is basically she goes back in time to 3 different like major historical events in like the history of like the Black civil rights movement. Like, the first, I don't remember exactly what the first one is, but the second is like the assassination of MLK, and then the third like involves, I think it's like supposed to be like a Riverdale version of the LA riots. Like, she also gets like the Holy Grail. It's very weird, but it's an amazing episode because it is. They also indicate that MLK's death is quote, a fixed point in history that like cannot be changed. And they only bring this up to later explain that Jughead's eventual death is the same as MLK's death, in that it is a fixed point in history that cannot be changed. Like, I wish I could offer a synopsis for this, because this is the episode, that's the episode that like I showed to some of my friends and was like, if you need to watch Riverdale, this is the evidence of that, because this is like, they literally have her travel through time. Oh no, I remember what it is. So the first thing is she goes back in time to when Riverdale is about to be made a sundown town.
What?
And she like stops it from being made a sundown town. Which I don't think that is how that worked, but in Riverdale it is. They were going to vote on whether or not Riverdale was going to become a sundown town. And then she's able to stop it by having her guardian angel, who you guys met in the episode as Raphael, that guy she meets at the counter. But in this episode, he takes the form of different major characters from the show. So in this part of the time, he looks like Jughead. And then during the, I think, MLK's death one, he looks like Betty and is played by Lily Reinhart. And I think in the last one, he is played by and looks like Tony.
Okay.
Like, I'm explaining this to you and I understand that it sounds like complete word salad, because it doesn't make sense. Like, it's hard for me to explain.
And then at the end of the episode that we did watch, it's revealed that Tabitha is Riverdale's guardian angel.
Yes, she's Riverdale's guardian
apparently.
angel, and baby Anthony can't die and
is immortal.
And I'll give you a spoiler that, so you guys meet in this episode when they go to heaven, this older version of baby Anthony, who like the only main thing he does in that episode is proclaim his love for the ghoulies and be like, we're going to get married. In the next episode, Tabitha learns that she can, because she can travel through time, like age up baby Anthony into an adult man. So she like basically goes behind like a door, there's like a flash of light, and then out walks Tabitha and like the actor that played the adult version of Anthony in heaven, with no, like, there's no explanation whatsoever. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't, like...
The whole point is to do something crazy every episode.
They're like, how can we up this? How can we up the ante? How can we, like, do something that they didn't expect? And, like, how can we make everyone who is watching, like, scream? And I think they honestly have achieved what, if that's their goal, they're doing a really great job, at least to me.
I'm sorry, Donna, but I am the ultimate wild card. I am the daughter of the Black Hood, the nightmare from next door. I'm training with the FBI, and I'm coming for you, you psycho bitch.
What were everyone's favorite moments from the episodes that we watched?
Oh,
like any moment.
I mean, there was a lot.
What's there? Because
there was a lot.
It's not even that there's a lot of good stuff. It's just like, I don't know how to explain this, but it's amazing. Like, it's just like how, like,
I did love where they're suddenly on top of the diner singing in the...
Oh yeah, no explanation. Now they're just on top of the diner. I love the musical episodes because it's really not clear if, like, is it diegetic? Is it non-diegetic?
That was one of my questions.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No one cares. Like, are they actually doing this performance in the halls? Like, are they actually changing Kevin and like making him look like the Farrah Fawcett? Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Like,
I mean, the gargoyles in or whatever what is it called? Gargoyles and griffins and gargoyles.
Yeah.
That made me another thing where it was like, wow, you're doing like a Satanic Panic episode or like plot line with, again, removing any cultural context, and like that was I was like, as a D&D art RPG nerd, this is making me so frustrated.
Oh, season 3 is that entire thing. It's amazing. You would hate it.
I did think the line, he was a stud muffin, as we used to say.
Oh my fucking god, I completely forgot about that. Like, it's so good. She's like,
yes,
we.
You all used to say he was a stud muffin. That's totally a phrase that everyone was using.
It's literally so good. Like, I can't. Oh my god. Yeah.
I feel like, to me, it's both the Dream Warriors sequence in the Griffins and Gargoyles episode, because they're singing this song from one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies while they're on drugs which look like pop rocks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, all the drugs in this show look like candy. And then Alice sees this full core demon creature in the halls. It's just so good. And also, again, I love how they always need to put something dark in Betty. So I just loved how Sabrina's like, you are not allowed to go into heaven, Betty.
And then I will tell you that in the next episode, Polly, resurrected from the dead, makes sure that Betty can go to heaven by washing her feet. And in doing that, she's no longer the harlot of Babylon. She's allowed to go to heaven. So to ease your concerns.
Okay, again, where is the let's just get some imagery.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They were like, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah. I could list a million of my favorite moments from the show and a million from the episodes that I selected. I think one of my current favorites has to be Ladies Who Lunch, because I think Veronica's like physical, Camila Mendes is a comedic actress, if nothing else. Like, when she like throws the glass and then it's just like, drink to that. I don't really know the context for Ladies Who Lunch from Company. And I really need to look into it because like I really want to see the comparison, but there's that. And then I think like Betty's performance of like the sort of threatening to Donna, like, I'm the ultimate wild card, is just like a personal favorite like line delivery that I
am
have.
the daughter of the Black
The
Hood.
nightmare from next door. I'm training with the FBI and I'm coming for you, you psycho bitch. Like, it's so good. I will say, in about 2 weeks, I am getting a tattoo, and I requested an American traditional style, and it needs to involve like playing cards or something, which is a really common American traditional sort of like visual thing. And I basically just said, I don't care what it looks like, as long as somewhere on the tattoo it says the ultimate wild card.
Oh my
God. Because I needed something that had enough plausible deniability, and it does, because my mom is getting a matching tattoo with me, and she does not know that it is a reference to Riverdale. I'm never going to tell her.
That, honestly, iconic. That's amazing.
She doesn't need to know. What she doesn't know can't hurt her. So
yeah. Unless she listens to this pod and we include this little bit in, then
don't listen, Betsy. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah. Basically, I just want to end on how a lot of the camp in this show, it's not just how it's the classic Archie comics characters being put through the ringer. It's also how it's, as you said, Claire, degraded art. Basically, it's a degraded art that everyone is really compelled to just at least learn about what's going on in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything you want to shout out, Claire? Anywhere people can find you online, or?
Oh God. I don't really do anything sort of media related on any of my social media, so I won't drop in my like Twitter or Instagram. But I, as of now, have a page on the University of Wisconsin-Madison like communication arts thing under people. Ooh. If you go to people under that like homepage, you will find my name and my email. So that's a great way to contact me, I guess, if you're like want to talk to me about this show, which I'm always willing to talk to people about this show or any kind of stuff. I also do a lot of work on YouTube and other sort of digital celebrity type things. So I promise Riverdale is not all of what I do. It's just a little fun aspect of it that I really love. But yeah, so any sort of media literacy stuff, I'm always down to chat with people about cool academic work.
Thank you so much for being guesting on today. I'm glad.
Yeah, this was so fun.
Well, thank you for having me. I will always appreciate an opportunity to talk about the show with people and geek out about it. It's always a thrill and a fun time to talk to people, fellow film and media studies people, about film and media, always.
You can find us on Twitter at GivingCampPod.
And on Instagram at It's Giving Camp Pod.
Our theme music that you are listening to right now is by Harrison Lurie.
Shout out to our patrons, Nicole and Jose.
I'm Saffron Heftegaub, and I'm online at Gaub Hefta.
And I'm Fabiola Liano, and you can find me on Twitter at Fabiola_Liano.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoy our podcast, please recommend it to your friends and give us a rating online.